thank you to those who have joined us. We may have some others join in, but again, the most important part about this webinar is that it will be recorded. And ideally, this is the second time we've done this Creating Custom Forms in Vibe webinar, but ideally the audio will be produced much better than in the last one. We had some audio issues where things were a little bit jumbled or hard to hear at some points. So the hope is that this webinar will be a little bit easier to listen to in the recording that we post out to the resource library. So again, my name is Craig Altham. I'm a member of the Vibe Resource Library team. Currently it's a committee of one. I say I'm part of a team, but it's been just myself for about a year now. You can always email me at vibelibrary@novell.com. What I'm responsible for here with Vibe is maintaining and updating the Vibe Resource Library. What we're going to do here today for the webinar with building custom forms in Vibe, we're going to talk about building the form definition. We're going to go over data names. I'm going to go over some of the form elements that you might use. There might be some that I skip over, so if I do and there's a question you have about certain form elements that I might not cover, please feel free to write those questions in, and I'll make sure to take time at the end to cover those. We'll talk about field sets, layout options on a form, talking about tables and HTML, building the view definition, and then configuring a folder so that you can actually utilize your form. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to send those in as we go. I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. If there are any that I miss, I'll make sure to get to them at the end if you have any. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the resource library. So here we are at novell.com/vibe. You just type in novell.com/vibe. It'll take you here to the product home page. And right here is the resource library tab that has dozens and hundreds of free resources for you to help you to be able to use Vibe more efficiently, more effectively, and perhaps you might have employees or others who are getting to know Vibe. They can come out here and get a lot of these resources that will help them to know how to use Vibe in the best way. We have custom forms and workflows. That's what we're going to be working on today, is the forms part. I'll also be sending out an invitation for a workflows webinar that we'll be holding here in about probably 3 or 4 weeks, sometime in February. There's videos and audio, which a lot of the videos are short 3 to 5 minute videos that go over the functionality of Vibe. There's introductions, how do landing pages work, how to utilize the document management side of Vibe, all the different elements within Vibe, just short videos on how to use those. This webinar will be placed here in the webinar section of the resource library. You'll see here that we've done some on JSPs, done some about vibe.novell.com, which we call Vibe Public Access, and a bunch of others. So if you ever want to come back and watch this webinar or see other webinars, you can certainly do that from the resource library. This Creating Custom Forms is the one that we'll be replacing, hopefully with the audio. So you'll see it here up at the top instead of down where it was. Now, the Vibe installation that I'll be using for this webinar is Vibe Public Access. It's vibe.novell.com. And to use vibe.novell.com, it's open to any user as long as you have a novell.com login. If you don't have that, all you need to do is come to novell.com anywhere here. If you click on Login, you can do Create Account. So you can create a new account. They'll send you over an email. Once you have the email, you can come over here and log in and use public access. What this allows you to do is perhaps you'll build something that's on your private installation of Vibe, and the user might not have access. I know guest access is now available in 3.4, but there might be some other access issues. And so you can actually come out here, have them create a Novell.com account, and they can use Vibe here. Data quotas are limited to 50 megabytes per user, but it seemed to be a great space for people to use Vibe in more of a public setting. So anyway, just wanted to go over that really quickly. And this is what we'll be using for the webinar in terms of the build. Out here, not only is there a demo on helping people learn how to use Vibe, there's a sandbox that contains a lot of those resources you saw out on the resource library. Those same forms and workflows are out here in a working fashion. So I can click on this and it'll show me this form that has already been created, and you can see how it works in Vibe. And then this projects area is an area where here's Kablink. It's been moved over to here. You can work with partners here, and then if you're interested in working on Vibe betas, sign up for betas and do betas here. Right now there aren't as many, but there's Novell as well as NetIQ beta projects that are out here on public access. So go ahead and close out this window, and we'll go ahead and get started with creating custom forms in Vibe. What I've done is I've come out to my personal workspace here for Resource Library, and I've created a workspace called Vibe Custom Form Workspace. So pretty generic. I created a files folder that will reconfigure in a few minutes to hold the form, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So what I like to do is in a workspace, I like to create the form and workflow at the parent level, not in some of the sub-levels, because it just is easier for me conceptually to know where I put it and where to find it, and then I can implement it throughout the whole workspace. So here I am at the parent. I'm going to click on Workspace and Form View Designers. And then I'm going to click New, and then a form in Vibe is called an entry definition. So we're going to create an entry definition for this form. And the form that I wanted to kind of copy for this webinar is the IT project form project request form that I put out on the resource library a few months ago. I figure in an IT field, this would be one that would be used quite a bit. So I'm going to just call it IT project request. And now this caption is what I'll see on the form when I go to configure it, but the data name is what's important when I try to call it out to other places in Vibe when I'm trying to utilize this form. So the important thing to remember with data names is that you don't want to use spaces. You can use capital letters, you can use lowercase letters, you can use numbers, all of that stuff is fine, but as soon as you start trying to just add in spaces, it's not going to like it and it won't accept it. So I'm going to type in IT project request. And here I'm not going to assign any family because I already have a files folder that I can configure it to. So it doesn't need to have a family per se. If you want to give it one, that's fine. And then what I always like to do is give it comment types so that people, when they come to a form that's been created, they can comment and work around that form. So once I've done those things, I can click OK, and it'll take me into this designer. I'm going to close out of this really quickly so you can see from this Form View Designer's launch window that came up. Now we have this IT project request. And kind of set up a cheat for myself so that I can do this a lot easier. So hopefully I didn't close out of it. Okay, there it is. Kind of a template for me to follow along so that I can stay on task and coherent to you who are listening, following along. So what we're going to focus on right now is the entry form definition. Once we've built out the form definition, then we'll build out the entry view definition. Okay. So here we have the entry form definition, and here we have a title that's represented here. And if we want to rename that, we can certainly rename it. And what I like to do is rename the title to something that's specific to the form that's being created. And so what I'm going to change the title name to is the project name, so that when I see it in a folder, I can know the name of this specific project. So I'm going to click on title here, and then click modify. And I'm just going to change the caption. I'm not going to change the data name. It's still going to be title. I'm going to change this to project name. Leave that there. And I personally, this 60 pixel width for the text box usually seems to suit me, but for a project name, it might be longer than that. So I'm going to build that out to about 100, and I'm going to make it required. Select OK. Now you'll see that there is a little asterisk there telling the user that this field has to be filled out in order for the form to be submitted. This description right here is also another element that is native to the entry view designer, entry definition designer. And what I like to do, this is a little bit chunky and sometimes I don't really find a use for it. So I can actually come over here and delete it because I don't think I'm going to necessarily need it for this type. The attachments that we saw right here, if you know that the people who are sending it aren't really going to be attaching any documents, you can actually hide that form element. So once we've done that, that disappears. And then these form buttons here correlate with this. Now what we're going to do is build out the form so that it looks a little bit more like a form. So the next field that I'm going to submit is, so we have a project here that's being requested, and we want to know who's given authorization for that project to be created. So I'm going to come here to the form and select form, because that's the area where I want it to be created. I'm going to select add, and then it's going to give me a list of form elements and layout options. Right now I'm just going to focus on form elements. And here I'm going to use a user list. I'm going to say executive sponsor authority. Meaning that this individual has given authorization for this project request to go in. So if we have any questions, we can go to that authority and find out a little bit more about that project. I'm going to make this required as well. And the nice thing about this type of element is if you're using WebDAV, this will sync with the directory, and what it will allow you to do is, let's say that I am the authority, so I'm going to type in Craig Altham. It's going to start populating a list of users, and so I can click here and select that, so that user is there instead of necessarily having to type in. So now Vibe is going to recognize this user as we go throughout the form, and we can easily contact that person through some hyperlinks that are created with the form. And Right now it's going to be below some of the other things that we've created. See how it's below these form buttons? So to move that, we can go over here and click on it, select Move, and then we'll just select the area where we want to move it under. And so we'll select the title, and we'll move it below. Some of the options are move it above, below, and into. There are some elements that don't allow you to move it into the element. For instance, title, you can't move a user list into a title, but you can move the elements into some of the layout options that you saw. So another thing that I want to know is this person who's the sponsor authority, what department is he a part of? And so I'll click again on Form, Add, and then this time I'm going to use a text element. I'm just going to type in department. And I'm going to do 60 to make this required. Then I'm going to move that up just underneath here. So here I've started a pretty simple form, and as you can tell, it's not really looking very user-friendly. One thing that I like to use is an HTML element that allows me to give the page a little bit nicer look, a little bit more dynamic. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Form because I want the HTML element here in the form. I'm going to click Add, and then down under Layout Options, there's this HTML option. Select that. I'm just going to call this Form HTML. This isn't going to be seen by anybody, so you can really give it any name you want. And then I've got some code that I've already created that I'm going to use to populate in here. And then I'm going to close out the divs. And let's just look over the code here really quickly. Here we've set it. The background is 100%. We've got margins set at 10%. And these margins left and right, they're going to have a certain color of white. So here we have 80% here. And so this is going to be some instruction or text that the users will see that's part of the HTML. It tells them it's a project request. It tells them what to do and kind of what's going to happen with the form once it gets submitted. So I'm going to click OK, and you'll see here that now there's some HTML. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move that up to the top. And then what I can start doing is adding some of these elements that I've created into this HTML rather than it just sitting here in the form. So I'm going to click on Title, move that up into the HTML, and here I can click Into, and now you see it's moved. And let's say that the blue bordering doesn't suit you. You can always come out here and change that color. Let's see, let's find another color that might. So this should be a Vibe blue, so it's going to match this color here. Okay. Now, this form that we're building, we're going to want to give another layout element to it so that not everything is listed vertically, but we're going to want to list some things horizontally so that things match up and kind of make more sense. In order to do that, I'm going to use tables. see. Looks like we had a question, so let me see. So the question that was asked before, it was when I mentioned eDirectory. It says, can the user list be restricted to a group in eDirectory? That's a great question. Go ahead and send that to me in an email at vibelibrary@novell.com, and I'll get back to you on that in terms of restricting it. A lot of times it just pulls in from the entire directory, but there might be a way to restrict it. So I'd love to get back to you about that. So again, email me at vibelibrary@novell.com, and I'll do some inquiring and get back to you about that. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to create some tables here in the HTML, so that when I can pull elements into here and they'll be represented that way. So I'm going to click HTML, add, and then I'm going to do a 2-column table. And this will be the first table that I create. We'll make them 50-50, as in percentage. It will take pixel width or percentage. So right now there's nothing you can tell that there's a table here, but as soon as I take this user list and move it into that table, what it's going to do is it's going to occupy the first table first, which will be represented on the left, and then the second table will be represented on the right. So again, user list, move into, and you'll see it places it under here, under the title like we want. And then when I select this text for the department and move it into this, it's going to be represented on the right. I've had a lot of questions in the past about how do you create 5 or 6 elements. It's not as hard as you might think. All you do is duplicate. So you'd put, here I have a 2-column table, and in this 2-column table I can add a 3-column table. And so when you start adding 3-column tables within a 2-column table, then one of those columns will actually have 3 tables in the one, if that makes sense. So if you have a 2-column table and you move a 3-column table into the first column, then you'll have a 4-column table, because the first column will allow for 3, then the last column will allow for 1. So hopefully conceptually that makes sense. I'm not going to take time to do that, but that's something that I wanted to explain because I have had questions about that in the past. All right, another part of the form that I want is maybe some information about the desired start date, who the manager is, when they want it completed, because it's a project that needs to fit into a certain parameter. And so really quickly, I'm just going to add some date elements into this HTML. And the nice thing is, once you have this HTML, as soon as you start adding things, it's going to add it to the bottom of this. And also if you repeat, so let's say I add one more item into this 2-column table, it's going to move it again to the left column. So it kind of, first element, left column, second element, right column, third element, left column, fourth element, right column. So I'm going to do right here a desired start date and a desired completion date. I'm just going to add it here into this table. So desired start date. And this is the caption that will show up on the form. And again, the data name won't appear on the form, but should be different so that you can use it, because each data name is unique and has to be its own data name. It can't be shared or it won't work. I'm going to have the current date set here and make it required. And so when someone comes to the form, it'll automatically be populated. Now to do another date, here on the right. This one I'm not going to have an initial setting, so it will be blank until someone fills it in. Desired completion date. Make that required as well. And you'll see here all we've done is continue to use this 2-column table. And again, first item left, second item right, third left, fourth right. And it will just keep going down there as long as we continue to use that table. So now with this desired completion date that doesn't have an initial setting, they can come in here and choose any date that they want. What we're going to also want about in this form is an executive summary, kind of a business need that's driving the project, so that we can say, yes, this is justifiable, or no, it's not. So what I'm going to do, instead of continuing here in the table, I'm going to create a text area element that allows an individual to fill out a paragraph of a description that they want to use for explaining the business need. So in this HTML element, I'm going to create a text area. And we'll call it an executive summary. And here we can abbreviate in the data name. That's not really as important. We're going to make it 600 pixels wide and 300 pixels tall. We're going to make this required as well. And you'll see here that it's been brought down right here. You can also add additional text into that will allow for more explanation about what the element requires. But this is something that people can drag out and fill it up as much as you want. These form buttons, now that they're still out here, I'm going to actually move those in here. So they'll show up here at the bottom. And then I'm going to create a second set of form buttons so that they're at the top. So if somebody wants to submit from the top or bottom once they've reviewed their form, they can do that. We're going to align it to the right so that it doesn't interrupt this text over here. Select OK. I'm going to move it above the title. So now we have these two form buttons. And if we don't like that it says OK and cancel, you can come in here and modify them. Let's see. It's right here. You'd click on the OK button or the cancel button, modify them, and a lot of times I like to have them say submit instead of OK. And then cancel seems to make sense, but here we have submit and then OK. Some of the other form elements that you might decide to use, checkboxes allow you to make a list of items, and users can check which ones they want. A lot of times what you'll need to do between checkboxes is create another HTML break element so that they're not close together. Let me show you kind of what I mean by that. So here I have this checkbox here. I'm going to move it into the HTML. Now if I create another one right below it, let's see. are really close together. And sometimes that's not a big deal, but other times, just with how the other spacing is in the page, you might decide that you want to have a little bit more of a break. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just create an HTML form here and do a little break. And then I'll put that in between these two elements. And it'll give it a little bit more spacing, which to me makes it look a little bit nicer and not so close together. A couple other of the elements that you might decide to use. Again, we saw the description before that we deleted, but sometimes those are helpful. It has the WYSIWYG editor, and so if I add that back in, they can come in here and add pictures, add Vibe workspaces, videos, have a little bit more add some more dynamic content to some of this text that they'll be adding in. To me, it seems a little busy at times, depending on the type of form that you're creating. So sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. Another few elements. Select box is one that I like to use. Gives you more of a list that you can create. They can select multiple, or you can have it where they can select only one. So if you have any other questions about what these Vibe elements for forms are, you can always go to the documentation, which is found at novell.com/Vibe under technical info, documentation. You can type in, depending on what installation you're using, whether it's 3.3 or 3.4, 3.1, you just search the documentation for form elements, and it will pull up descriptions for each element that can be used and what they can be used for. I had another question. Do data names need to be unique to the Vibe workspace or the entire Vibe database? That's a great question. Data names should be unique to the workspace that you're working in. So this form, I can have a unique data name here and use that same data name on another form, and it will be captured only within that form. So that's a wonderful question about data names. So thanks for asking that. Let me know if that clarified things for you, if you have any other questions about that. So here we've built out a pretty basic form that someone can fill out. And now what we want to do is create a view so that when the form has been filled out, you can actually view the content that has been submitted in a folder. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this HTML code that I created so that when I use it, see it in the folder, it will have the same look and feel as it did when I filled out the form. And I'm going to add that over here into the entry view definition, HTML, and I'm just going to call it HTML layout view. And a lot of times on these, the view never really gets, these captions and data names don't ever get seen. And so you can really call them whatever you want. But again, with the data name, you want to make sure to not have spaces. Close this out. And now what I'm going to do is take this and move it up to the top. And I'm going to pull some of the elements that I want to be in there. Some of these other things like the checklists, I don't really care to have. So we're going to move the title into this HTML section that we created. And now some of the other things, we want it to match what this was So we're going to create a 2-column table under here, under HTML, 2-column table. We're just going to call it table 1, table 1 view. Again, we did 50%. Now that we have that, we can start adding these elements. And the elements that we created, we can start just pulling in. So we need the project name, which is the title. We've already pulled that up and in. We need the executive authority. Select OK, and that adds the element in. We need the department. And we're going to need the executive, or the date ranges. So desired start date, desired completion date. And now before I add this last element with the text area, I'm actually going to take you over here to this files folder, and we're going to configure it so you can see what it looks like before all of the elements are moved in. So what I'm going to do, I come to the files folder, select folder, and then come down to the very bottom section and configure views, URLs, and controls. So pull up another pop-up window. We're going to still have it be a files folder, but we're going to change this so that the default entry, instead of being a file entry, is this form entry that we built called a local definition. That's why it's called an entry definition, is you're creating a new entry type. So here we've selected IT projects, and as of right now we don't have any workflows that we've created, but that is something that we'll do in a couple of weeks. So select apply, close, and now when I select here, instead of it saying new file, it says new IT project request. So I can click on that, and here we have the form that we fill out, and all of those items are here because the form's been created. So we're going to just call it a test project. I'm going to type in my name as the authority. Engineering, we're going to have it start today, and we'll have it completed hopefully by the 31st. And all of these that are required, again, need to be filled out. These aren't required, so I don't have to check those. I'm going to select OK, and now I have this test where I created a view, but not all of the information that I just captured on the form is represented because I still haven't added in this executive summary. So what I'm going to do is come up here, and under HTML, I'm going to add this executive summary element so that it displays under the 2-column table, not in the 2-column table. And now if I come back over here, I can refresh this, and this executive summary is now being represented here. Now there's a number of ways that you can share these so that people can access where to fill out a new form. You can send them directly to the folder using permalinks, and then they can come here and fill out a new form. Or out on a workspace, you can create a few different options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually right-click here and copy this so that it's going to behave as if I were creating something new from this landing page. I'm going to edit this workspace, and I'm going to pull over an HTML element. I'm going to say fill out a new form by clicking here. I'm going to highlight this and then add that hyperlink that I copied from the fill out a new form button. open the same window, insert that, and then I like to always give it a certain color. It's a preference. But now on the landing page, I've got this click here to fill out an IT request by clicking here. I can click here and it will pull up the form. And then I can hit cancel and it'll take me back to the landing page. One thing that I failed to cover was field sets. One thing that I like about field sets is it sets some of the information apart from others. And so, for instance, this executive business executive summary is another section than maybe some of the project information. So I can create a field set here, HTML, click that, add, and then come down here under layout options, select field set, and I'm going to call it project information. I'm going to move this let's see. I grabbed the wrong one. Okay. Yeah, this is the right one. HTML add field set, customer information, project information. Select OK. Move that above the title. And then I'm going to move the title and this two-column table into this first field set because that contains a lot of the project information. I'm going to move it into, again, the table, click on that, move, and then I can even click title and move it below. And it looks like I did that over here in the view. So I'm going to do it again really quickly here. HTML, add, field set. Project information. Move it to the top, above the title. I'm going to move the title and the two-column table here. And it kind of gives a more pronounced grayed out area where there's no questions as to what section of information is being filled out. Hit cancel there, close out of this window, and now if I come over here to this files folder, click here, you can see that field set because I created it in the other place as well is now represented there. I can rename this files folder. Instead of files, I can call it project requests folder, and I keep doing EU instead of UE. But here we have the project request folder where these are created. We can give that a description. So the reason I'm saying this is there are the projects that are that have been requested but not approved. Is we'll set up a workflow in the next webinar that will move these entries into another folder once they've been approved. We'll have a workflow process that will go through a review, and then they'll be approved or rejected. And we'll have other folders here for approved projects and rejected projects, things like that. So this is about all that I had for the webinar today, building out this simple vibe form and going over some of the form elements, creating the view, and those types of things. Make sure we didn't miss anything else. I think we got that all covered. So again, my name is Craig Altum. I'm here with the Vibe Resource Library. If you have any questions, feedback about the webinar, or again, we had one question about user lists being restricted in a group in eDirectory. If you can email me that here at vibelibrary@novell.com, that'd be very helpful. And I'll stay on for the next 4 or 5 minutes if you have any additional questions for me. Otherwise, I really appreciate you attending, joining us here with the webinar today. We're going to strive to have a lot more of these throughout the year to help users know how to use Vibe a little better. So thanks again for your attendance, for your cooperation, and have a great day.